When you want to buy a new sofa for your living room, you want to make sure that it makes sense for your place. But how do you figure out what size will work best for you? Hi everyone, it's Carol from Discover Interior Design, and I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to my first part of my three-part video series on how to select a sofa. And in this video, you're going to learn how to figure out a size of a sofa that will work best for you. So let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to do is answer the question, what size of sofa will work in our space? And one of the first steps to figuring that out is really deciding where you're going to place the sofa in your living room. And when you're deciding that, there's a couple things to keep in mind. You can keep in mind natural places where it makes sense to place your sofa. So maybe that means up against a wall, or maybe out in the room, or it's keeping in mind and noticing natural directions to place your sofa. So if you have kind of a longer wall, a sofa is a long piece of furniture. So that may make sense to place it on a wall that is longer. So let's take a look at a room example where we can figure out a sofa size. So this is the room that we're going to use. And when we're looking at the room, I see two possible locations where we can place a sofa. One would be up against this wall, and the other would be out in the room. Then when we take a look at the room in a floor plan view, we can get a better idea of where the sofa could go. So we can see in this floor plan view, there's a front door, and we can see where the kitchen is and the dining room area. And yeah, I think it would make sense to put the sofa up against that one wall, but yes, it could go out in the room. So after you have some ideas of where you may place your sofa, maybe it's one spot, in front of the window, or maybe you have two different options, one in front of a wall or one out in the room. Then I want you just to keep in mind a standard size sofa and to use that as a placeholder to see, what size will actually work there. And you can start with a standard size of a sofa, which is 6.5 feet wide. So it's 78 inches wide, and then 3 feet deep, or 36 inches deep. And when you're looking for sofas and, with every kind of furniture that's out there, there's always this big variety of sizes, which is good, which is really, really good. But it's helpful just to start with a size of a sofa that will fit 3 people, kind of a standard size. And then you can kind of go from there and adjust from there. And then if we place a standard size sofa in option number 1, where we place the sofa against a wall, for sure we can see that there's plenty of space for an average size sofa. And even before we think about putting in other pieces of furniture, we probably have some flexibility with the size of that sofa. Maybe it could go a little bit bigger or even a little bit smaller. And then if we put the sofa in the location in option 2, we can see that that average size sofa will work there as well. One thing we have to keep in mind when we're placing the sofa out in the room like that, we need to make sure that there's plenty of space for clearance around the sofa. And while the average size sofa will probably work out there in the room, we may need to be careful about maybe not having it too much larger, because we need to make sure that there's plenty of space around it. And especially when we start to put in other pieces of furniture to be part of that seating arrangement. And then while you're thinking about location, think of other things that you may want to have in that seating area. Other chairs, a coffee table, side tables, or even an area rug. So when you are thinking about the location of your sofa, you kind of have to keep in mind some other items that may be included in that seating area. And to give you some more details about deciding where to place your sofa in a living room or even a great room or family room, you can watch my video about layout ideas for your living room and where to place your sofa. And so I'll put that link in the description. And then when we start to plan things out a little bit more and really thinking about what other pieces of furniture or accessories or anything else that we're going to have in that seating area, in option number one, we have a lot of space. We can put side tables or a plant or a lamp next to the sofa. We can even put a coffee table in front of the sofa. And also we have space for even accent chairs. Then when we look at option number two, where the sofa is out in the room, we probably have room for a side table on the right side and then a coffee table and maybe one chair over on the left side. And we may have room for maybe a console table where we could put a TV and maybe something in the corner. But what we would want to make sure is that we planned that layout, that arrangement with plenty of space so that we can walk behind the sofa and that we can walk inside into that seating arrangement. And that's why I didn't use the other chair, because I wanted to make sure that there was plenty of space to get into that seating arrangement from the kitchen and the dining room area. So you will just kind of look at those places where you want to place your sofa and just take some measurements. Will, 78-inch wide by 36-inch deep sofa fit there? And all you're looking at right now is the actual size of that piece of furniture. And just as a preliminary measurement, just to kind of see if that will work where you want to place it. The other thing that you'll need to think about is the overall size, not just the actual size of the sofa, but the overall size, the overall space that that sofa needs. And that's thinking about clearance. So we want to make sure that there's plenty of room in front of the sofa or maybe behind the sofa and on the sides of the sofa to make sure that people can move around and get in and out of the sofa. And there are a couple of guidelines you can think about. How much clearance or space you need around the sofa depends on a couple things. It depends on the location, where you're going to place that sofa, but also what else is going to be around it. So when you are placing a sofa in front of a wall, for instance, you want to make sure that there is at least 36 inches in front of the sofa. But if you have a coffee table, which most likely you will have a coffee table in front of the sofa, you want to make sure that there's 18 inches in front of the sofa before you have that coffee table placed there. And you also want to make sure that there is a couple inches on either side of the sofa and even in back of the sofa so that things are not placed right up against the wall or even right up against another piece of furniture. So if you have side tables, for instance, or even a lamp, a floor lamp, or a plant, you would want to make sure that there's just some wiggle room there, a couple inches on either side. Or even if you place a sofa on a wall where there's an opening on one side, you wouldn't want to place the sofa right up to where that door opening is. You would want to make sure that you place the sofa just a couple inches in so you don't bump into the sofa. Or if you have a sofa that's out in the room, you would want to make sure that there is clearance around the back of the sofa for people to walk behind it. And that's where I would recommend at least 36 inches. All we're thinking about is making sure that there's room for your sofa, the actual size of the sofa, but also room for other pieces of furniture and room for movement around the sofa. So an overall size of a standard sofa, if you're going to place that out in your room, that would mean the overall size that you need for that sofa would be 78 inches wide plus 36 inches to be able to walk behind the sofa. So the overall size would be 78 inches by 72 inches. So in option number one, when we want to think about the overall space that that sofa needs, we could come up with an area that is 82 inches wide by 56 inches deep. And what that's taking into account is leaving a couple inches behind the sofa and on either side of the sofa, and then 18 inches in front of the sofa before you find the coffee table. Then in option number two, if we want to find out what size of an area that we need for that entire sofa, we would come up with a size that's around 116 inches wide by 90 inches deep. And what I did was leave 18 inches in front of the sofa before the coffee table is there, then a couple inches in between the sofa and the side table, and then 36 inches behind the sofa for a walkway. In fact, there's probably even a little bit more, which is even better. And then also 36 inches on the left side of the sofa to make sure that someone could walk into that seating arrangement. When you do have a sofa or any other piece of furniture out in a room, most likely it's just going to take up more space. We need more overall space for that piece of furniture because we want to make sure that there's plenty of clearance to walk around the furniture and move around the furniture really easily. And what happens if you have a wall that's, say, 8 feet wide and, a standard size sofa is 6.5 feet wide? Does that let you know, like, oh, okay, I can get, a 7.5 foot wide sofa? Well, yeah, you probably could do that. But what I want you to think about is the size and scale of your room. And I want you to know how large your room is, measuring the overall size of your room, and also measuring the ceiling height in your room. Because we want to think about scale, and scale has to do with size, but scale has to do with the relationships between sizes, between different elements in a room. So say if you do have a wall that's 8 feet wide and you go, great, I can buy a sofa that's just under 8 feet wide. Well, is that going to work in your room? If your room is a little smaller and, standard height ceilings, that might be too overwhelming. The scale of that sofa may be too big for your space. Or you want to choose a sofa that's kind of chunky and kind of big. Well, will that scale, will that size of that sofa, that overall size of that sofa, will that work in your smaller living room space? It may not. So I want you to think about that. Think about, size and scale, the actual sizes of furniture and how much space they need, but also the scale and the relationships between your furniture and your room. So after you've taken some time to kind of think about where you want to place your sofa and you're using that kind of standard average size of sofa, this is where you can decide if you can adjust the size a little bit, or maybe that size is just right. But what I would recommend doing is kind of thinking of a range of sizes. So, what's the smallest size that will work in that area, and maybe what's the maximum size? So that when you go out and about and look for a sofa, that you'll find those sofas that are in those sizes that will make sense for you. So in our room example, after taking some preliminary measurements and figuring out where we want to place the sofa and what else will be in that seating area, we can come up with a range of sizes that will work. We can keep in mind that we would like to have the flexibility of having the sofa either against the wall or out in the room, or we can decide on one or the other. If we decide to have the sofa against the wall, we have some flexibility. We can have that sofa be a little bit smaller, maybe, 76 inches wide instead of 78. But we could also make it larger, maybe even up to 82 inches wide. So we have a little bit of flexibility there. But if we have the sofa out in the room, I would probably stay around that average size of 78 inches wide. It could go even a little bit smaller, maybe, down to 72 inches wide. So looking for a sofa for this room, if we want to have some flexibility and decide to either have it up against the wall or out in the room, looking for an average size sofa around 78 inches wide may be the best choice. Maybe there's some wiggle room there, maybe 76 inches all the way up to maybe 80 inches, but we would want to make sure that that size would work either against the wall or out in the room. So I'd love to find out from you if you have any other suggestions that we can use to figure out a sofa size. So please share your design ideas in the comments. And please look out for parts 2 and 3, where we'll talk about how to think about quality and comfort and how to choose a color. Thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.